Okay, Cherie Lindbergh, coming at you again to talk about connection. My last video was all about attachment and how that regulates our internal systems, and a lot of that is done through an attachment cycle that is very unconscious when we were very young. But what it does is it regulates our systems, and then from that we start to tell ourselves stories about the world. It starts to create our worldview. It starts to create how we show up in the world, what we believe about the world. And then it starts this process of adaptations that we do to survive here. So if you have a very secure attachment, again, your thinking is, oh, the world is safe, I will be taken care of, I am lovable. Those are kind of the worldview or the lens through which the child starts to grow up. And things are a little bit easier for them. They tend to be more resourceful. They trust that if they ask to get their needs met, that somebody will be there to help them. Insecure, they struggle with that. Sometimes they'll reach out, and, unfortunately, when we have a certain lens, when we're reaching out, we're actually reaching out for that lens to be true or that story to be true. So we start to interpret things through that lens. So if I am a securely attached person and I believe that the world is a safe place, I'm going to ask people for certain things and not even thinking that that's not going to happen or I'm going to get necessarily rejected. It's just assume that, oh, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll ask the next person. Things can roll off their shoulders a little bit more. They have a little bit more resiliency, going into the world. Whereas more insecure folks that don't believe, that they're a little bit more, less trustworthy of others. They struggle with trust a little bit more. They're going to be more watchful. If they're anxiously attached, they're insecure in relationships. So they're going to be checking, like, are we okay? They're going to be wondering a lot, like, do you like me? Those kinds of things. And they're not sure. They're watching for the next rejection or possible rejection. And sometimes that rejection isn't even happening, but because they're concerned about that, they start to perceive rejection where it may not be. Okay? And then you have avoidantly attached, which are dismissive. And so what do we do? Like, okay, are we, if we grow up in a family where our own parents weren't securely attached and they don't know how to offer that to us, are we just like, well, that's the way it is? Well, these are patterns, right? And they're worldviews and ways of looking at things. But if we do some personal work and skill building inside of ourselves, which creates awareness, and through awareness we can kind of catch ourselves when these patterns are happening, and then we can start to we can show up differently. So if I'm really insecurely attached and I'm constantly questioning, I can find a partner and start to work with that partner, and learning how to ask, this is what the story that I'm telling myself is. These are some of the imago skills that I teach in relationship counseling. But I can say to my partner, when that happened the other day, the story that I'm telling myself is that you were just about to reject me, or a rejection was coming. And then an attuned partner, somebody who is there and listening and really genuinely cares, can mirror their partner and say, so what I'm hearing you say is, when that happened the other day, the story you were telling yourself is that a rejection was coming. Am I getting you? Yes. And then over time, that person that is insecurely attached can start to realize, oh, these are the stories I'm telling myself. My partner behaves a certain way, then these stories inside of me get triggered. And then we start to recognize that these stories have lived in there a long time. It's not just with the partner that they get triggered. They get triggered in other friendships. They get triggered when we were children. We start to see, oh my gosh, this is what it was like with my dad, or this is what it was like with my mom. And so when we bring that up to consciousness, the stories stop controlling our behavior. They might hijack us initially, take us over, but the more that we keep working on this and the more that we share the stories to a partner that we can start to build a trusting relationship with, this is where we can start to drop the story. Pema Chodron talks a lot about this in some of her different books that she's written, but Living Beautifully with Uncertainty is one of the books that she talks about learning to drop the story, like being aware. Another example about learning to drop the story is, when I was younger, I've had several betrayal things that have happened to me in my life. And so there's a story in here that, at some point I'm going to get betrayed. That was the child Cherie's story. And then you come into an adulthood, and guess what? There were some examples of that in my adulthood life. And it became like, this is the way life is. Until one day, working on that and wanting to show up differently, I was able to say, okay, I don't know what I did wrong here. I don't have an opportunity to make a correction or a repair with this person. This person decided to do A, B, or C, and I'm sad about it, but my brain wanted to go down that betrayal story, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell myself that story. They're not betraying me. We didn't have an opportunity to repair these misconceptions or miscommunications or whatever they were, and this person elected to do X, Y, Z. And I'm sad about that. I wish it was different. I wish I had an opportunity to repair. I didn't. And so I'm more accepting of what is versus trying to make it what I want it to be. And so that is one example of where we learn to drop the story and we learn to change the story. We show up differently. And so my whole part about learning to stay connected is about, like, as humanity, as human beings, we have these experiences all the time. And I don't want to be somebody that is closed off. I don't want to be like, all right, I'm going to hold out here until I really, really trust you, and then I'll let you in. I've had people that I thought I could trust 10 years, 15 years, and then they did something that was out of character. And I'm like, I'm not willing to wait 10 years, I trust that what is happening in the world and in my relationships, that there's a reason behind it. And I try to learn from each relationship. Do I wish some of those things were different? Yes. Do some of those things that ended, do I wish that there were, better endings? Yes. But not everybody knows how to have a good ending. And so what I've tried to do and what I'm trying to do here to share is that being aware of the stories that live inside of us, learning a tool like using Imago Relationship Therapy, that they have a dialogue process. It is through that process that I teach couples that we have different stories, and that sometimes my story triggers your story, vice versa. And we learn to make all of that conscious so that we can make conscious choices about how we show up, and that we can stay connected even if there's discomfort and even if we don't agree. And I'm wanting that message to get out there, because I think in our world today that we are so divided, and it keeps happening. And my hope for this world and for human beings on this earth is that we start to learn these skills so that we can come back together, because we need connection and we need each other. that's what brings inspiration and hope to the world. And I think, I know news is important, us being aware of what's happening in the world, but I also am aware that our brains are hardwired for negativity. And it's much easier for us to go towards negativity than it is for us to be conscious and intentional and try to move towards compassion. Because it's harder. We have to work harder to do that because of the stories that live inside of us. And so this is just a short video on, getting you to think about, do you want to learn how to stay connected, even if there's conflict? In future videos, I'll walk you through a dialogue process and teach you some of these things that I work with couples on, that I've used in my own relationship of 33 years. And my hope for you is to be inspired to show up differently in 2022 and enrich your relationships. And, if you aren't in a place of gratitude, you can practice learning how to have gratitude. It's not like all of a sudden you know how to do it. These are ways of training yourself inside yourself and working with the material inside yourself. Again, the stories that you tell yourself, the emotions, all those things, being aware of it, learning how not to be hijacked by it, and bringing that consciousness and intentionality to yourself and to your relationships. So I hope you will continue to join me in 2022, and I would love to hear some feedback. If you have questions, that way I can address them in future videos. Thanks.